Thank you, Mr Davies, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I would also like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, and indeed the member for Ruislip and Pinner for their securing of this important debate. In addition, I would like to thank a number of local groups within Reading and Woodley, particularly Reading Refugee Support Group, Red Kitchen, various local churches and faith groups who've all contributed to supporting refugees and asylum seekers in our area. Mr Chairman, I believe it is fundamental that we treat asylum seekers and refugees with dignity, according to international law, and with respect. And I wanted to focus my remarks on some issues which have happened in Reading, which I have indeed already raised with ministers, and I'm grateful for their support in this matter. I would also like to say that the town that I represent has a proud history of supporting people in difficulty, going back to at least the time of supporting Belgian refugees in World War I, and indeed many other conflicts since then. The issues I would like to raise today are those at the George Hotel, which the Home Secretary very kindly helped me and offered some support on last year. This is a hotel in the centre of Reading where a number of refugees and asylum seekers were placed at short notice at the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously, at that time, resources were under great pressure. However, issues continued over some months, and I wanted to highlight some of the problems to illustrate the scale of the issues that we face as a country, and also to flag this up to the government and ask for a fundamental rethink. We had reports, which I've investigated with my colleague, the Shadow Immigration Minister, of problems with food being inappropriate or insufficient, a lack of connection with local medical services, such as asylum seekers not being registered with GPs, and indeed a lack of financial support, which meant that those in the George Hotel were at times unable to make small local journeys or other journeys to meet people they needed to see. So, for example, a disabled man at one point had to walk all the way to the Royal Berkshire Hospital, which is about 3/4 of a mile away from the George Hotel. Many of these issues seem to relate to the contractor Clearspring, and indeed the Home Secretary was very gracious in helping to address some of those back last year. This contractor seems to have, from my experience, a relatively poor track record in our area. I can't comment on the further wider issues, but it does raise some questions about the nature of the provision and whether there ought to be a much more fundamental rethink, as indeed a number of colleagues have pointed out. I'm grateful again. I appreciate the lack of time this morning. Grateful for the Minister's support in this. I do hope there will be a much broader and wider rethink of the policy of how the asylum seekers and refugees are supported in the UK. We do need to maintain very high standards of support and keep up our excellent tradition of supporting and welcoming people. Thank you.
Anne McLaughlin.